Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
At the museum anniversary gala, my millionaire sister lifted the bronze statue I'd crafted until my hands bled and declared it a $28,000 masterpiece she created. She tightened her grip on my wrist and proclaimed, "Without my mercy, this sick woman would have rotted somewhere forgotten." The entire hall applauded Saint. I simply smiled and quietly pressed a button. The screen behind us flickered to life. A secret video began to play, and as the truth unfolded, the color drained from her face in front of everyone. It was time to settle the score. I'm so grateful you're here. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Also, a quick note, this story blends life experiences with fictional elements for storytelling and education. Names and details are imagined, but the lessons they carry weight. Any resemblance to actual people or places is purely coincidental. Now let's dive in. The oncologist's office smelled like industrial cleaner, and something I couldn't name, maybe fear, maybe resignation. Outside the window, January snow fell over Minneapolis in thick, silent curtains, burying the city under another 6 inches. I watched a snowplow grind past on Hennepin Avenue, its yellow lights blinking through the gray afternoon, and tried to focus on that instead of Dr. Rebecca Harrison's voice. "I'm sorry, Theodora," she was saying, her hands folded on the desk between us. "The pathology confirmed stage 3 ovarian cancer. We caught it, but not early." I nodded. I'd already been through 12 rounds of chemotherapy. I'd already had the surgery. My hair had fallen out in clumps in a hospital shower, and I'd watched my savings account bleed out almost as fast. The numbers, doctor. Harrison had given me 3 months ago $340,000 for treatment. Maybe more had seemed abstract then, like a figure from someone else's life. They didn't seem abstract anymore. "Your follow-up scans look stable." Dr. Harrison continued, her voice gentle but clinical in that way oncologists learn. "But you'll need monitoring every 3 months for the next 2 years. Blood work, imaging, the whole protocol." I heard the word protocol and thought about my architect's license, which had lapsed somewhere between the 3rd and 4th chemo session. I'd been too sick to renew it, too broke to pay the fees, too exhausted to care. The firm I'd worked for past tense, had been understanding at first. Then they'd been politely distant. Then they'd stopped calling altogether. "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I did. Everything felt like it was happening through a pane of frosted glass. Dr. Harrison handed me a folder thick with papers, prescription refills, appointment schedules, a photocopied list of support groups I knew I'd never call. "Do you have someone at home, family, a partner?" I thought about my ex-husband who'd left 2 years before the diagnosis, and my empty condo in Uptown which the bank had foreclosed on last month. "Not really." Her expression softened. "Theodora, you've been through hell. You need rest. You need support." I nodded again and left before she could say anything else kind. Kindness made it harder. 3 days later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I was sitting on the floor of my friend's guest room in St. Paul. She'd let me crash there after I lost the condo, surrounded by cardboard boxes that held everything I owned. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. Celine Marlowe. Mobile. My younger sister. We hadn't spoken in 8 months, maybe longer. Thea. Her voice was warm, bright, unmistakably Southern. She'd moved to Charleston 5 years ago and never looked back. "Oh my God, I just heard. Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't have an answer for that. Celine and I had never been close, not really. 10 years apart, different lives, different worlds. She'd always been the charming one, the one who made everything look easy. "I'm okay," I said, which was a lie. "You're not okay." Her voice turned firm. "Listen, come home. Charleston's beautiful this time of year, and you need family. I've got space, plenty of it. You can stay as long as you need." "Celine, I can't just—" "Yes, you can." I could hear traffic in the background, the distant sound of a horn. She was probably walking down King Street, phone pressed to her ear, already planning. That was Celine, always moving, always performing. She had over 300,000 Instagram followers who watched her curate her life like a gallery exhibit. "I mean it, Thea. You're my sister. Let me help." I looked around the guest room, at the boxes, at the stack of medical bills I couldn't pay, at the email from the bankruptcy attorney I'd been avoiding for 3 days. I had nowhere else to go. "Okay," I whispered. The flight south took 4 hours. I slept through most of it, my head pressed against the window, and woke as we descended over the Carolina coast. The land below was flat and green, stitched with rivers that gleamed like silver thread. It didn't look anything like Minneapolis. Celine picked me up at Charleston International in a white Range Rover that probably cost more than my old condo. She looked exactly like her Instagram blonde highlights, oversized sunglasses, a linen dress that somehow wasn't wrinkled. She threw her arms around me in the arrivals hall, and I smelled expensive perfume and hairspray. "You're here," she said loud enough that people turned to look. "You're finally here?" Her fiancé, Colton Westbrook, stood a few feet back, hands in the pockets of his chinos. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never worrying about money. "Nice to meet you, Theodora," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, polite, distant. "Thanks for letting me stay," I said. "Of course." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Marlowe House sat on a tree-lined street in Charleston's historic district, surrounded by other old homes with columned porches and wrought iron gates. It had belonged to our parents, who died in a car accident 7 years ago, and we'd inherited it 50-50. Celine had bought out my half 3 years ago when I needed cash for the firm I'd been trying to start. Now it was entirely hers, a restored 19th century mansion with magnolia trees in the front yard and a sprawling garden out back. "You'll stay in the carriage house," Celine said as we pulled into the driveway. She gestured toward a smaller building behind the main house, a 2-story structure with tall windows and old wooden beams. "It's private quiet. I just had it renovated." It was beautiful in a shabby chic way. Whitewashed walls, exposed rafters, a kitchenette in one corner. The windows overlooked the garden, and beyond that, the glowing lights of the main house. I set down my single suitcase and tried to feel grateful. Celine stood in the doorway, backlit by the porch light. "You're safe now," she said, and hugged me again. That first night, I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed and listened to the sounds of Charleston cicadas, distant traffic, the faint hum of the air conditioner. Through the window, I could see the main house, its windows bright, and I heard laughter, Celine's probably, and Colton's lower voice. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet, just until I figured out what came next. I had no idea how long temporary would last. By March, the list had grown to fill an entire page, single-spaced 11-point font, the kind of document you'd get from a landlord, not a sister. 5 bedrooms to vacuum and dust, 3 bathrooms to scrub laundry every other day, meal prep for breakfast and lunch dinner, assistance most evenings, water the indoor plants and the patio garden, wipe down all surfaces, fold and put away, tidy and straighten. The tasks bled into one another until I lost track of what I'd done and what still needed doing. I worked 6 hours a day, then 7, then 8. My shoulders ached from lifting mattresses to change sheets. My knees were bruised from kneeling on tile. I developed blisters on my palms that broke and bled and hardened into calluses. Each morning I woke at 6 and started. Each night I collapsed into bed and stared at the ceiling, too tired to even think about what my life had become. The day of my oncology follow-up, I was ready by noon. I'd marked the appointment on the calendar Celine had hung in the carriage house, circled it in red. 3-month post-treatment check. Blood work, imaging, the whole protocol. I couldn't miss it. I stood by the door with my purse and a notebook where I'd been tracking my appointments, watching the driveway. I'd learned to keep my own records after the first missed appointment dates, symptoms, questions for Dr. Harrison, even though Celine kept all the official documents locked in her office. Celine was supposed to pick me up at 12:15. 12:30 came and went, then 12:45. At 1 o'clock, her car finally pulled in. She got out, phone pressed to her ear, and waved at me like nothing was wrong. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said when she hung up, her voice bright and rushed. I completely lost track of time. There was this disaster with the florist. "Celine, the appointment was at 1. My voice came out flat. "It's 1:15 now. Can you just call and reschedule?" She checked her phone. "I have a cake tasting in 20 minutes, and if I miss it, they'll give our slot away." I stared at her. "This is my cancer follow-up." I know, and I'm sorry, Thea. I really am. She touched my arm, her expression contrite. But it's just a checkup, right? You're fine. You can go next week. She got back in the car before I could answer. I called the oncology department from the carriage house, my hands shaking. The receptionist's tone was clipped annoyed. We'll have to reschedule. Next available is April 12th. That's 5 weeks away, I said. Yes, ma'am, that's the earliest we have. I hung up and sat on the bed, still holding my purse, and felt something crack inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Just a hollow understanding that I was not a priority. That my health, my body, the cancer that had nearly killed me, it all mattered less than cake samples and flower arrangements. That night I checked my bank account. $847. I hadn't looked in weeks, afraid of what I'd find, but I needed to know. I opened a new tab and searched Rent Charleston Historic District. The numbers that came back made my stomach drop. One bedroom started at $1,400 a month. Studios were $1,200 if you were lucky, and that was just rent. First month, last month security deposit, I'd need at least $4,000 just to move in somewhere. I had $847. I scrolled through my email and found the collection notices I'd been ignoring. Medical bills, thousands of them, all overdue, all threatening legal action. My credit score had tanked. No landlord would take me even if I had the money. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark listening to the sounds of the main house. Celine's laughter, the clink of glasses music drifting through the garden. They were having people over. I hadn't been invited. I started sculpting that night. I didn't have proper materials, not really, just the polymer clay I'd bought weeks ago and some tools I'd improvised from kitchen utensils. But I cleared the kitchenette table and set to work, my hands moving almost of their own accord. I made small figures, abstract forms, 3 or 4 inches tall bodies in motion or stillness. I wasn't sure which. The clay was cool and smooth under my fingers, yielding to pressure, responding to heat. I worked one piece into a figure curled inward protective, another reaching upward open. At some point, I remembered the lost wax process from architecture school, the way you could cast bronze from clay models. I didn't have the equipment, but I started experimenting anyway, melting beeswax in a double boiler, making rough molds. It was makeshift and imperfect, but it was something. My hands remembered the process before my mind did. The way to build up form, to carve away excess, to balance weight and negative space. This was architecture in miniature structure, material, meaning. For the first time in months, I felt like myself. I worked past midnight, past 1, until my eyes blurred and my back screamed. When I finally set down the tools, I had 5 small figures lined up on the windowsill, catching the moonlight. They weren't much, but they were mine. A few days later, Sebastian appeared at the carriage house with an armload of reclaimed wood. "Thought you might like these," he said, setting them down by the door. Pieces of old molding sections of carved balustrade, a length of heart pine floorboard, worn smooth by a century of footsteps. Pulled them from a teardown on Trad Street, too good to waste. "They're beautiful," I said, running my hand along the grain. He glanced past me into the carriage house, and his gaze stopped on the windowsill. "Are those yours?" I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside. I didn't invite him, but I didn't stop him either, and picked up one of the small sculptures, turning it over in his hands. He examined it closely, the way I'd seen him look at old buildings, cataloging every detail. "This is professional work," he said finally. "Where'd you train?" "Architecture school. But I haven't done anything like this in years." "Your hands don't forget." He set the figure down carefully. "You need to be making art, Thea. Not just for yourself, because you're good. Really good." Something loosened in my chest, something I hadn't realized I'd been holding tight. "There's a foundry on James Island," Sebastian continued. "Small operation, but they do beautiful bronze work. I know the owner. Let me introduce you." "I can't afford—" "He's always looking for talent. Might even have work for you." Sebastian pulled a card from his wallet and set it on the table. "Think about it." After he left, I stood there holding the card, staring at the address printed in plain black ink. Riverview Foundry, James Island. For the first time in months, someone had looked at me and seen more than a burden, more than a cancer patient, or a charity case, or a housekeeper. Someone had seen an artist. I didn't know yet how much I'd pay for that recognition. I didn't know what it would cost me to be seen. But in that moment, it felt like everything. By the end of February, something had shifted, nothing I could name at first, just a change in air pressure like the feeling before a storm. The camellias bloomed in the garden bright against the morning fog, but inside the warmth I'd felt those first weeks had cooled. Celine's visits became less frequent. No more coffee at my door each morning, no more impromptu lunches on the piazza. Instead, I'd get texts. "Can you clean the guest bathroom?" "Thanks." Left supplies by the door. I ate alone more often, heating up leftovers in the carriage house kitchenette, the silence pressing in around me. I told myself it was normal. She was busy with wedding planning. Colton had projects. I was fine, but I wasn't sure I believed it. The first request came on a Thursday. Celine knocked, didn't just walk in anymore, and leaned against the doorframe, phone in hand. "Hey, Thea, could you do me a huge favor?" She didn't wait for an answer. "I've got a venue tour in an hour and the house is a disaster. Could you just tidy up the guest bathroom? I left the supplies on the counter." "Of course," I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're a lifesaver. And you know, since you're staying here, it would help you feel less like a guest, more like family. We all pitch in around here." The words landed gently, but something about them stuck. Pitch in. Staying here. Like I needed to earn something I thought had been freely given. I cleaned the bathroom. When I finished, I stood in the doorway and looked at the gleaming tile and felt something I couldn't name. Not quite pride, not quite shame. Somewhere in between. 3 days later, I overheard them. I was in the carriage house sketchbook open, trying to work on a drawing of the garden wall. The window was cracked for the breeze, and their voices drifted across the yard from the back patio. "How long is she going to stay?" Colton's voice sharp and impatient. I froze. "She's my sister," Celine said, but her tone was defensive, not warm. "What am I supposed to do?" "I don't know, but we can't afford to keep her here indefinitely. She's not contributing anything, Celine. She's just taking up space." The words hit me like a slap. My face burned. I set down the pencil, my hand shaking, and stared at the page without seeing it. Freeloader. That's what he meant. That's what I was. I closed the sketchbook and sat there in the quiet, the shame settling into my chest like a stone. He was right. I wasn't contributing. I had no job, no income, no way to pay rent. I was living off their charity, and now I knew exactly how Colton felt about it. Maybe Celine felt the same way. That afternoon, I walked to a cafe on King Street, needing to be somewhere that wasn't the carriage house, somewhere I could breathe. I ordered coffee I could barely afford and sat at a corner table with my sketchbook, drawing the building across the street, an old warehouse with arched windows and crumbling brick. I was halfway through shading the roofline when someone stopped beside my table. "You're an architect." I looked up. A man stood there, early 40s, maybe tall and lean, graying at the temples. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up and carried a leather messenger bag. His eyes were kind. I said. "May I?" He gestured to the chair across from me. I nodded and he sat down, setting his bag on the floor. "Sebastian Vale," he said, offering his hand. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. "I run a salvage business, architectural reclamation mostly. I can tell from the way you draw that those aren't just sketches. They're plans. You see the bones of a building." I blinked, caught off guard. "I used to. I haven't worked in a couple years." "Life happens," he shrugged. "But the skill doesn't go away. You've got an eye for it." It had been so long since someone had seen me as anything other than a patient, a burden, a charity case. I felt something loosen in my chest. "I'm Theodora," I said. "Thea." "Good to meet you, Thea." He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. Simple cream cardstock, Vale Salvage and Design. "If you ever want to talk shop or if you need work, give me a call. I'm always looking for people who understand old buildings." I took the card, running my thumb along the edge. "Thank you. I mean it." He stood slinging his bag over his shoulder. "Charleston needs more people who care about what came before. Don't lose that." He left, and I sat there holding his card, feeling like I'd been handed something precious. A week into March, Celine appeared at the carriage house door with a sheet of paper in her hand. Hey, Thea, so I was thinking. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. It might help for both of us if we had a little structure, so you don't feel like you're just floating. She handed me the paper. It was a printed list typed and formatted with my name at the top. Weekly schedule. I scanned the tasks. Vacuum all floors, carriage house and main house, dust surfaces and baseboards, clean 3 bathrooms, laundry, meal prep assistance, dishes after dinner, water the plants, tidy living spaces daily. The list was long. I know it seems like a lot, Celine said, her voice bright. But honestly, it's just the stuff I'd normally do. And this way you're contributing, earning your keep. There it was again, earning your keep. I looked at her at the printed schedule at the line at the bottom where she'd left space for a signature, like a contract. It's fair, she said, and her smile was warm, sisterly. Don't you think? I thought about Colton's voice through the window. She's just taking up space. I thought about the $847 left in my bank account, the medical bills still unpaid, the jobs I couldn't apply for because my license had lapsed and I had no address that felt permanent. I thought about how I had nowhere else to go. Yeah, I said quietly. It's fair. I signed my name at the bottom. I started the next morning, vacuuming, dusting, scrubbing. The tasks took longer than I'd expected, 4 hours, then 5, then 6. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, my hands raw from cleaning solution, my back aching. But I told myself it was fair. I was living here for free. This was how family worked. This was what I owed. I didn't let myself think about how the list seemed to grow each day, how Celine would add a task in passing. Could you wipe down the patio furniture like it was nothing? I told myself it was fair, but the list kept growing. By March, the list had grown to fill an entire page, single-spaced 11-point font, the kind of document you'd get from a landlord, not a sister. 5 bedrooms to vacuum and dust, 3 bathrooms to scrub laundry every other day, meal prep for breakfast and lunch dinner assistance most evenings, water the indoor plants and the patio garden, wipe down all surfaces, fold and put away, tidy and straighten. The tasks bled into one another until I lost track of what I'd done and what still needed doing. I worked 6 hours a day, then 7, then 8. My shoulders ached from lifting mattresses to change sheets. My knees were bruised from kneeling on tile. I developed blisters on my palms that broke and bled and hardened into calluses. Each morning I woke at 6 and started. Each night I collapsed into bed and stared at the ceiling, too tired to even think about what my life had become. The day of my oncology follow-up, I was ready by noon. I'd marked the appointment on the calendar Celine had hung in the carriage house, circled it in red. 3-month post-treatment check. Blood work imaging the whole protocol. I couldn't miss it. I stood by the door with my purse and a notebook where I'd been tracking my appointments, watching the driveway. I'd learned to keep my own records after the first missed appointment dates, symptoms, questions for Dr. Harrison, even though Celine kept all the official documents locked in her office. I'd learned to keep my own records after the first missed appointment dates, symptoms, questions for Dr. Harrison, even though Celine kept all the official documents. Celine was supposed to pick me up at 12:15. 12:30 came and went, then 12:45. At 1 o'clock, her car finally pulled in. She got out, phone pressed to her ear, and waved at me like nothing was wrong. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said when she hung up, her voice bright and rushed. I completely lost track of time. There was this disaster with the florist. Celine, the appointment was at 1. My voice came out flat. "It's 1:15 now. Can you just call and reschedule?" She checked her phone. "I have a cake tasting in 20 minutes, and if I miss it, they'll give our slot away." I stared at her. "This is my cancer follow-up." "I know, and I'm sorry, Thea. I really am." She touched my arm, her expression contrite. "But it's just a checkup, right? You're fine. You can go next week." She got back in the car before I could answer. I called the oncology department from the carriage house, my hands shaking. The receptionist's tone was clipped annoyed. "We'll have to reschedule. Next available is April 12th. "That's 5 weeks away," I said. "Yes, ma'am, that's the earliest we have." I hung up and sat on the bed, still holding my purse, and felt something crack inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, just a hollow understanding that I was not a priority, that my health, My body, the cancer that had nearly killed me, it all mattered less than cake samples and flower arrangements. That night, I checked my bank account. $847. I hadn't looked in weeks, afraid of what I'd find, but I needed to know. I opened a new tab and searched Rent Charleston Historic District. The numbers that came back made my stomach drop. One bedroom started at $1,400 a month. Studios were $1,200 if you were lucky. And that was just rent. First month, last month, security deposit, I'd need at least $4,000 just to move in somewhere. I had $847. I scrolled through my email and found the collection notices I'd been ignoring. Medical bills, thousands of them, all overdue, all threatening legal action. My credit score had tanked. No landlord would take me even if I had the money. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the main house, Celine's laughter, the clink of glasses, music drifting through the garden. They were having people over. I hadn't been invited. I started sculpting that night. I didn't have proper materials, not really. Just the polymer clay I'd bought weeks ago and some tools I'd improvised from kitchen utensils. But I cleared the kitchenette table and set to work, my hands moving almost of their own accord. I made small figures, abstract forms, 3 or 4 inches tall bodies in motion or stillness, I wasn't sure which. The clay was cool and smooth under my fingers, yielding to pressure, responding to heat. I worked one piece into a figure curled inward, protective, another reaching upward, open. At some point, I remembered the lost wax process from architecture school, the way you could cast bronze from clay models. I didn't have the equipment, but I started experimenting anyway, melting beeswax in a double boiler, making rough molds. It was makeshift and imperfect, but it was something. My hands remembered the process before my mind did, the way to build up form, to carve away excess, to balance weight and negative space. This was architecture in miniature structure material meaning. For the first time in months, I felt like myself. I worked past midnight, past 1, until my eyes blurred and my back screamed. When I finally set down the tools, I had 5 small figures lined up on the windowsill, catching the moonlight. They weren't much, but they were mine. A few days later, Sebastian appeared at the carriage house with an armload of reclaimed wood. "Thought you might like these," he said, setting them down by the door. Pieces of old molding sections of carved balustrade, a length of heart pine floorboard, worn smooth by a century of footsteps. Pulled them from a tear-down on Trad Street. Too good to waste. "They're beautiful," I said, running my hand along the grain. He glanced past me into the carriage house, and his gaze stopped on the windowsill. "Are those yours?" I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside. I didn't invite him, but I didn't stop him either, and picked up one of the small sculptures, turning it over in his hands. He examined it closely, the way I'd seen him look at old buildings, cataloging every detail. "This is professional work," he said finally. "Where'd you train?" "Architecture school, but I haven't done anything like this in years." "Your hands don't forget." He set the figure down carefully. "You need to be making art, Thea. Not just for yourself, because you're good. Really good." Something loosened in my chest, something I hadn't realized I'd been holding tight. "There's a foundry on James Island," Sebastian continued. "Small operation, but they do beautiful bronze work. I know the owner. Let me introduce you. I can't afford... He's always looking for talent. Might even have work for you." Sebastian pulled a card from his wallet and set it on the table. "Think about it." After he left, I stood there holding the card, staring at the address printed in plain black ink. Riverview Foundry, James Island. For the first time in months, someone had looked at me and seen more than a burden, more than a cancer patient or a charity case or a housekeeper. Someone had seen an artist. I didn't know yet how much I'd pay for that recognition. I didn't know what it would cost me to be seen. But in that moment, it felt like everything. Spring turned to summer, and I kept sculpting. Each night after the chores were done, after the vacuuming and the dishes, after Celine's dinner parties and Colton's complaints about the baseboards, I'd retreat to the carriage house and work until 2, sometimes 3 in the morning. The kitchenette became my studio. I'd clear the table, lay out, my tools turn on the radio low enough that no one in the main house would hear, and let my hands remember what they knew. I made small figures, abstract forms that felt more honest than anything I could name. Bodies in motion, or stillness, or something in between. I signed each one Vesper Evening Star, the brightest light at dusk, and told myself it was just a name, not a prayer. In early May, Sebastian drove me to the foundry he'd mentioned. It was a small operation on James Island tucked behind a warehouse near the marsh, the kind of place you'd miss if you didn't know to look. Inside, the air shimmered with heat. Molds lined the walls, and a crucible glowed orange in the corner, molten bronze pooling like liquid light. The owner, a man in his 60s with forearms like iron, examined the clay models I'd brought. "Nice lines," he said. "Clean work." Over the next 2 weeks, we cast 6 pieces. I watched the bronze pour, watched the molds cool and crack open to reveal the sculptures inside dark metal, smooth and permanent. Sebastian stood beside me the whole time, arms crossed, grinning like a proud parent. "These are gallery-quality Thea," he said as we loaded them into his truck. "You should be selling them." "I don't know how." "Online. There are platforms for this. People buy handmade work all the time." I thought about the $847 in my bank account, the medical bills and collections, the growing certainty that I'd never leave this place. "Okay," I said, "I'll try." The first sale came 2 weeks later. I'd listed one of the sculptures on an online marketplace, anonymous, just the signature Vesper, and a brief description, handmade bronze abstract form, 8 inches. I took photos in the carriage house, natural light through the windows, and set the price at $800 because I had no idea what else to charge. 3 days later, I got an email. "This piece is stunning, exactly what I've been looking for. Can you ship to Mount Pleasant?" The buyer's name was Gemma Sterling, interior designer. She paid through PayPal within an hour. I sat on the bed staring at the notification, "You've received $800, and cried. Not because it was a lot of money, though it was more than I'd seen in months, but because someone I didn't know, someone who owed me nothing, had looked at something I'd made and found it worth paying for. The money was real. The work was mine. Over the next 4 weeks, I sold 2 more pieces. A collector in Charleston paid $950 for a figure I'd modeled after a dancer, all limbs and open space. Someone in Savannah bought another for $100. By mid-June, my PayPal balance had grown to $2,850, the first money I'd earned in 2 years. It wasn't enough to leave. Not yet. But it was something. A tether to the life I used to have, the person I used to be. I started dreaming about studios, about foundries of my own, about mornings that didn't begin with someone else's to-do list. I let myself imagine a version of the future that didn't involve scrubbing bathrooms or counting pennies or wondering if I'd ever stop feeling like dead weight. For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt something close to hope. Then Celine walked in. It was mid-afternoon, a rare moment when I wasn't cleaning or cooking or running errands. I was working on a new piece at the kitchenette table, my hands smoothing the clay, 3 finished sculptures lined up beside me, waiting to be cast. I didn't hear her come in. She had a key, of course, and she'd never been good about knocking. I just looked up, and there she was, standing in the doorway, eyes fixed on the table. "Oh my God, Thea!" She stepped closer, picking up one of the sculptures. "Did you make these?" My chest tightened. "Yeah." She turned it over in her hands, examining the signature on the base, the curve of the form. Her expression shifted, something bright and sharp, like a light turning on. "These are beautiful," she said. "Are you selling them?" I hesitated. "A few, online." "How much?" $800, $1,000, it depends. Her eyes widened. "Seriously, people are paying that." "Some people." She set the sculpture down carefully, like it was fragile, and looked at me. Her smile was warm, sisterly, the way it used to be before the chore lists and the missed appointments. "Thea, this is amazing. You're so talented, and you're just what hiding it in here. You should be showing these off." She pulled out her phone, scrolling. "I have 350,000 followers now. If I posted about this, you'd have more buyers than you'd know what to do with." "Celine, I don't." "Let me help you," she said, and her voice was so earnest, so genuine. "You're my sister. This is what family does. I could sell these for you, promote them, handle all the logistics. You just keep making the art." I wanted to say no. Some part of me, the part that had overheard Colton in the garden, that had waited by the door with my purse while Celine forgot my appointment, wanted to say, "I'll do this on my own." But I was so tired. Bone-tired, soul-tired, the kind of tired that made everything feel impossible. And she sounded so sincere. "Okay," I said quietly. "If you really think it would help." She hugged me quick and tight. "You won't regret this, Thea, I promise." I should have said no. I should have remembered the chore list that kept growing, the texts that replaced morning coffee, the cake tasting that mattered more than my cancer checkup. I should have seen the way her eyes lingered on the sculptures, the way she smiled when I told her how much people were paying. But I was so tired and she sounded so sincere. I didn't know yet that sincerity was just another word for performance. That help could be a trap dressed up as kindness. I didn't know yet, but I would. A week later, Celine presented her plan. She invited me into her home office, a room I'd never entered before, all white built-ins and a desk that probably cost more than my old car. Her laptop was open to a spreadsheet, numbers color-coded and precise. She gestured to the chair across from her and handed me a coffee in a mug that matched the decor. "I've been thinking about how we can really maximize this," she said, clicking through tabs. Instagram analytics, competitor pages, a list of Charleston galleries and their commission rates. "You're sitting on something incredible, Thea, but if you keep selling one piece at a time on some random marketplace, you're leaving money on the table." She turned the laptop toward me. A mock-up post, one of my sculptures against a white background, professional lighting caption, written in her breathy influencer voice. "Introducing Vesper, a local sculptor creating museum-quality bronze work right here in Charleston. Limited availability. DM to inquire." "I have 350,000 followers," she said. "That's 350,000 potential buyers. I can reach people who will pay premium prices, collectors, designers, people who understand the value of what you're making." "Okay," I said slowly. "So here's what I'm thinking." She pulled out a printed sheet of paper, slid it across the desk. "A partnership. Official. You focus on the art, I handle everything else. Marketing, photography, pricing, logistics. 70-30 split. You keep 70%. I blinked. 70% for me. "That's better than most gallery deals," she said. "Way better. And you don't have to do anything except what you're already doing. I'll take care of the rest." It sounded too good to be true, which should have been my first clue. I picked up the paper. It was a simple agreement, maybe 200 words. Partnership agreement across the top. Revenue split 70%, artist 30%, agent. A list of Celine's responsibilities: marketing, photography, shipping, buyer coordination. A signature line at the bottom. "Let's do this right," Celine said, handing me a pen. "Professional, so we're both protected." I read it again. The language was vague, nothing about how expenses would be calculated, no clause about how long the agreement would last. But Celine was smiling at me, warm and encouraging, and I was so tired I could barely think straight. "I don't know," I said. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I want to make sure I understand everything." "Thea." She leaned forward, her voice soft, wounded. "Don't you trust me? I'm your sister. I'm trying to help you." The words landed exactly where she meant them to. In the place where I was still desperate to believe that family meant something, that the person who'd taken me in, when I had nowhere else to go, wouldn't take advantage of me. I signed my name at the bottom. That afternoon she posted. The photo was gorgeous. She was good at that, I had to admit. The sculpture looked museum quality against the white backdrop, the bronze catching light, in ways I hadn't noticed when I made it. The caption was perfectly crafted, a story about discovering local talent, about supporting artists, about the beauty of handmade work. "Sold in 20 minutes. Celine texted me a screenshot. "Sold for $1,200, I told you." I stared at the message, something bright and hopeful rising in my chest. 70% of $1,200 was $840. More than I'd made on any single piece before. More than I'd had in my account since before the diagnosis. 3 days later, I got a Venmo notification, $300. I stared at the screen, checked my math. 70% of $1,200 was definitely not $300. I called her. "Hey," she answered, her voice cheerful. "Did you get it?" "Yeah, but Celine, it's only $300. "Right, after expenses." "Expenses?" "Photography, shipping materials, platform fees, my time, coordinating with the buyer." Her tone shifted just slightly, like I was being difficult. "It all adds up, Thea. I spent at least 10 hours on this sale alone. I wanted to ask for a breakdown. Wanted to see receipts, invoices, anything concrete. But the words stuck in my throat, tangled up with guilt and exhaustion and the fear that if I pushed too hard, she'd take back the offer entirely. "Okay," I said quietly. "Trust me, this is still a better deal than you'd get anywhere else," she said. "And once we really get rolling, you'll see. The numbers will get bigger." By the end of June, Celine was asking for 2 pieces a week. My new routine: wake at 6, clean until noon, sculpt from 1 until 11 at night. 12-hour days, 6 days a week. I'd collapse into bed around midnight and wake 4 hours later to start again. The sculptures were getting smaller, not because I wanted them to be, but because I didn't have the energy for anything more ambitious. I stopped eating breakfast, skipped lunch most days. My clothes hung loose and the mirror showed a stranger. Dark circles, hollow cheeks, hands that shook when I wasn't working. But I kept going, because the money was coming in $300 here, $250 there, $400 if I was lucky. Not enough to leave, not yet. But something. One morning, Sebastian stopped by with coffee. "You look exhausted," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm fine." "How many hours are you working?" "I don't know. Enough." He studied me, his expression unreadable. "How's the partnership going with your sister?" "Good. She's selling everything I make. And you're getting paid fairly?" The question landed harder than it should have. I looked away. "It's fine." "Thea." "I know what I'm doing, Sebastian." He was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his coffee and pulled a business card from his wallet, the same one he'd given me before. "If you ever want to talk numbers," he said, "I know the market. I know what bronze work sells for in Charleston. Just make sure you're getting fair pay, that's all I'm saying." I took the card to make him stop looking at me like that. Like he knew something I didn't. Like I was making a mistake I couldn't see yet. "Thanks," I said. After he left, I threw the card in a drawer and went back to work. I didn't ask to see the receipts. I didn't question the numbers or demand a detailed accounting or insist on transparency. I just kept sculpting, kept signing my work. Vesper kept handing it over to Celine and accepting whatever payment she decided was fair. I wished I had. I wished I'd asked how $300 in expenses could eat up $900 of revenue. I wished I'd asked why shipping a 5-pound sculpture across town required $150. I wished I'd listened when Sebastian told me to check the market rates. But I didn't. Because I was tired. Because I wanted to believe my sister was helping me. Because the alternative, that she was lying, that she was stealing, that I was trapped in something worse than I'd imagined, was too much to hold. So I looked away, and the list kept growing, and the hours kept stretching, and the money kept not adding up. And I told myself it was fine. By fall, I'd become a machine. Wake at 5:45, dress in the dark, start cleaning by 6, vacuum the bedrooms, dust the baseboards, scrub the bathrooms until the tile gleamed. 12 noon, eat standing over the sink. Something quick. Something I wouldn't taste. 1 o'clock retreat to the carriage house and sculpt. Hands moving on autopilot, shaping clay into forms I barely registered anymore. 9 o'clock, clean the studio, pack the finished pieces. 10 o'clock, collapse into bed, too tired to shower. Too tired to think. Repeat. No weekends, no breaks, just the rhythm of work, the endless loop of tasks, the slow erasure of everything I used to be. July bled into August. August into September. I stopped counting days, started counting pieces instead. 24 sculptures in 3 months. $800 each time Celine transferred money to my account. $7,200 total. It should have felt like progress. It didn't. Celine's Instagram told a different story. Sold out in 10 minutes, she'd post with a photo of one of my sculptures against her signature white backdrop. Vesper's work is in such high demand, limited edition pieces. DM for inquiries. The comments would flood in. How much were they? Can I get on the wait list? She never answered the price question publicly. I'd see the posts and feel a strange disconnect, like I was watching someone else's life. The sculptures looked beautiful in her photos, professional, valuable, worth collecting. I told myself that's what the $300 payments reflected, the market rate minus her expenses. I didn't ask for proof, didn't check comparable sales, didn't do anything except keep working and hope the number in my account would eventually be enough. It never was. By the end of August, I'd lost 12 pounds. I noticed when my jeans wouldn't stay up when I had to cinch my belt to the last hole, and it still felt loose. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked gaunt, all sharp angles and shadows. My hair was thinning, stress maybe, or malnutrition, or both. I'd find strands on my pillow each morning more than I wanted to count. There were other signs. A persistent dry cough that wouldn't go away. Hands that trembled when I wasn't working clay. A dizziness that hit me when I stood up too fast, like my body was running on reserves that had long since emptied. I was supposed to have follow-up appointments every 3 months. Blood work, imaging the standard post-cancer protocol. But in July, Celine forgot to pick me up. In August, her car broke down, or so she said, and by the time I thought to call an Uber, she told me not to waste the money, that she'd take me next week. She didn't. Both appointments got rescheduled to November, 4 months without monitoring. 4 months of wondering if the cancer was coming back, if the exhaustion and weight loss were just overwork or something worse. But I had no way to get to the hospital on my own, and Celine always had a reason why today wasn't a good day. So I waited and worked and tried not to think about what might be growing inside me while I wasn't looking. Isolation crept in slowly, then all at once. My phone was always dead, not because I forgot to charge it, but because I never had time. When I finally plugged it in days later, I'd see messages I'd missed. 3 texts from Sebastian spaced out over 2 weeks. "You okay? Haven't heard from you." "Thea, I'm worried. Call me." "If you need anything, I'm here." I meant to reply. I'd start typing and then realize I didn't have the energy to explain, didn't have words for what my life had become. So I'd set the phone down and tell myself I'd respond tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. My friends in Minneapolis had stopped reaching out months ago. I didn't blame them. I'd gone silent, first too sick, and then too broke, and then too busy to maintain the illusion that I was okay. Now I had no one. Just Celine's texts asking when the next pieces would be ready, and Colton's voice drifting through the garden and the endless silence of the carriage house at night. Colton's comments started in late August. At first they were offhand, almost jokes. We were having dinner. Celine had insisted I'd join them, probably for appearances, and he gestured at me with his fork. "Finally earning your keep, huh?" He grinned like it was funny. I didn't say anything, just looked down at my plate. A week later, they had guests over. I was serving drinks, another task that had somehow become mine, and I heard Colton from the living room, his voice loud and easy. "My fiancé's sister is our live-in help," he said, and everyone laughed. "She's an artist too, keeps her busy." Live-in help. Like I was staff. Like I wasn't family, wasn't a person, wasn't someone who'd once had a career and a life and a name that mattered. By September, he'd stopped pretending it was a joke. "You missed a spot," he said one morning, pointing at a section of floor I'd just mopped. The floor was spotless. We both knew it. I went back and mopped it again. Later, I heard him talking to Celine in the garden, their voices carrying through the open window. "How long till we can sell the carriage house?" he asked. "Soon," Celine said, "once she's stable enough to move out." I stood there in the kitchen sponge in my hand and felt something crack inside me. Not surprise, just the slow, cold realization that this had always been the plan. That temporary had never meant what I thought it meant. By the end of September, I had $1,100 in my account. $7,200 earned minus $500 a month automatically garnished for medical collections, minus the $100 here and there for necessities I couldn't avoid. $1,100. Not enough for first, last, and deposit. Not enough to escape. I'd been working 14-hour days for 3 months, and I was further from freedom than I'd been in June. The math didn't make sense, but I was too tired to figure out why. I told myself it was temporary, just until I saved enough. Just until I found a way out, just until something changed. But the number never seemed to grow, and somewhere deep down in the part of myself I tried not to listen to, I started to suspect it never would. In October, everything I thought I knew began to crack. Celine called me in the middle of cleaning the guest bathrooms, her voice bright and breathless in a way I hadn't heard in months. "Thea, I have amazing news. I just got off the phone with a client, an interior designer from Mount Pleasant. She wants a custom piece, a big one, and she has a serious budget." I set down the scrub brush, my heart suddenly pounding. How much? $15,000. The number didn't seem real. I'd never made that kind of money on a single piece. Never even imagined it. Are you serious? Dead serious. She saw one of your sculptures at a client's house and fell in love. This is it, Thea. This is your big break. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. For 3 weeks, I worked on nothing else. The commission was for an 18-inch figure, the largest I'd ever attempted. I designed her as a woman emerging from water, head tilted back arms, rising the bronze, capturing the moment of surfacing. Water streamed down her body in textured rivulets. Her hair flowed behind her like seaweed. Her face was peaceful, eyes closed, as if she'd been underwater so long she'd forgotten what air felt like. I worked 16-hour days. The October weather had finally cooled, and I sculpted with the carriage house windows open, letting the breeze carry away the heat from the wax melting on the stove. Every curve, every detail, every line had to be perfect. This wasn't just a sculpture. It was proof that I was still an artist, still capable, still worth something. I poured everything I had into her. My skill, my heart, the parts of myself I'd thought were lost. When I signed the base Vesper, my hand didn't shake. This was what I was made to do. On a Friday in late October, Celine arrived with a photographer. "This is incredible, Thea," she said, circling the finished piece. The photographer snapped photos from every angle, the camera shutter clicking in rapid bursts. "This is your masterpiece." "You really think so?" "I know so." She wrapped the sculpture carefully in foam and bubble wrap, securing it in a wooden crate she'd brought. "I'll have the payment to you by next Friday. The client is going to love this." I watched her carry it to her car, and for a moment I felt like I was watching my daughter leave for college. Proud, terrified, hopeful. Friday came, no payment. I texted Celine that evening, "Hey, just checking on the payment. Processing should hit your account Monday." Monday, nothing. I called. She didn't answer. I texted again. "Client is being slow with the payment processing. I'm on it." By the following Monday, 2 full weeks after the handoff, I was starting to panic. $15,000. 70% of that was over $10,000. Enough for first, last, and deposit. Enough to leave. Then my phone buzzed. Venmo notification. $400. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. $400. Not 10,000. Not even 1,000. 400. I called her immediately. "Hey," Celine answered, her voice cheerful. "Did you get it?" "I got $400. "Right, after expenses." "Celine, the budget was 15,000. "I know, and expenses were higher than I expected." She sighed like I was being difficult. "Let me break it down for you. Professional photography session, 800. Premium shipping with insurance, 500. The gallery introduction fee alone was 2,000. Then there's the marketing campaign I ran, about 1,500. Platform fees were 20%, so that's another 3 grand. Plus materials consultation, about 400. And my time coordinating everything, 40 hours at least, and I bill at $150 an hour, so that's 6,000 right there. The numbers came so fast I couldn't process them. I tried to do the math in my head and couldn't make it work. "Can I see the invoices?" I asked quietly. The line went silent. "What?" "I just want to understand the breakdown. If you have the invoices..." "Thea." Her voice changed, went cold and sharp in a way that made my stomach drop. "You wouldn't have any sales without me. Do you understand that? Not one. I'm the one with the platform, the connections, the audience. I spend hours every week promoting your work, coordinating with buyers, managing logistics. And this is the thanks I get. You questioning me. I didn't mean, maybe I should just stop helping you all together. See how far you get on your own. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm doing this for you, Thea." Her voice softened, wounded now. "I thought you'd be grateful." I'm grateful. I'm sorry." After I hung up, I sat on the bed and stared at my phone. My hands were shaking. The Venmo notification was still on the screen, $400. The math didn't work. I knew it didn't work, but I was too afraid to push back, too afraid she'd cut me off entirely, too afraid to admit what I was starting to suspect. So I told myself maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe I didn't understand how the art world worked. Maybe the expenses really were that high. Maybe I was just ungrateful. I didn't know then that Gemma Sterling had paid $22,500 for that sculpture. I didn't know that Celine had kept $22,100. I didn't know the professional photography session was 20 minutes with her iPhone, or that the gallery introduction fee was a single Instagram DM, or that the premium shipping cost $15 and a short drive to Mount Pleasant. I didn't know my sister had looked at my masterpiece, the piece I'd poured my heart into the work that proved I was still an artist, and seen nothing but an opportunity to steal from me. I didn't know any of that. But I was starting to suspect something was very, very wrong. 2 weeks later, I knew something was wrong. The pain started low in my abdomen, a dull, constant ache that wouldn't ease no matter how I positioned myself. At night, I'd wake up soaked in sweat, the sheets clinging to my skin, my heart racing like I'd been running. And the exhaustion, it wasn't the tiredness of too much work anymore. It was deeper, heavier, the kind of fatigue that made my bones feel like lead. I recognized these symptoms. I'd had them before 2 years ago, right before the diagnosis. I called Dr. Harrison's office from the carriage house, phone pressed to my ear, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm having symptoms again," I told the receptionist. "Abdominal pain, night sweats. I need to be seen as soon as possible." "Let me check the schedule." A pause, keyboard clicking. "We can get you in on October 28th, 2 o'clock. 5 days. I could wait 5 days. "Thank you," I said, and felt something loosen in my chest. 5 days, and I'd know. 5 days, and I could stop wondering if the cancer was back. The day before my appointment, I went looking for my insurance card. Celine kept it in her home office along with my other important documents for safekeeping, she'd said when I first moved in. I knocked on her door and she looked up from her laptop, surprised. "I need my insurance card," I said. "My appointment's tomorrow." "Oh, right. I think I saw it in one of the drawers. Let me look." She opened the desk, shuffling through papers, her brow furrowed. Minutes passed, then 10 minutes, then 20. "I can't find it anywhere," she said, finally looking at me with something that might have been concern. "Are you sure you didn't take it out?" "No, it was here. You said you were keeping it safe." "I know, but I can't find it now. Maybe it's in the other office or upstairs." She glanced at her phone. "I have to run to a vendor meeting. I'll look when I get back, okay?" Hours later, she came back empty-handed. "I'm sorry, Thea. I've looked everywhere. You might need to call the insurance company and get a replacement." Replacement cards took weeks, and without the card, the appointment would cost hundreds of dollars I didn't have. I called Dr. Harrison's office and rescheduled. "Next available is November 2nd. The receptionist said, her tone clipped. I hung up and sat on the bed staring at nothing. Another week. I could wait another week. On November 2nd, I was ready by 1:30. I stood by the carriage house door with my purse and the folder of medical records I'd been keeping watching the driveway. Celine had promised to pick me up at 1:45. The appointment was at 2. If we left on time, we'd make it. 1:45 came and went. I texted her, "On your way." No response. At 2:15, her car finally pulled into the driveway. She got out, flustered hair disheveled. "I'm so sorry the car wouldn't start. I had to get someone to jump it, and then there was traffic. Celine, the appointment was at 2. I know, I'm sorry. Can you call and explain?" I called. The receptionist's voice was colder this time. "You'll need to reschedule again. Next available is November 18th. 2.5 weeks. Almost 3 weeks since the symptoms had started. Almost a month since I was supposed to be seen. Can we try an Uber?" I asked Celine after I hung up. "I can use the money from—" "Don't waste money on an Uber," she said, already heading back to the main house. "I'll take you next time, I promise. I just have so much going on with the wedding." I stood there in the driveway holding my purse and my folder and felt something inside me crack. Not break, just crack. A hairline fracture in the belief that my sister cared whether I lived or died. A few days later, I noticed the mold. I was showering in the carriage house bathroom when I looked up and saw black spots spreading across the ceiling in the corner above the tub. They hadn't been there before, or maybe they had, and I'd been too exhausted to notice. But now they were unmistakable, a dark bloom creeping outward, fuzzy at the edges. The smell hit me next, musty damp like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. I knew what it was. I'd studied building materials in architecture school, knew the dangers of black mold, especially for people with compromised immune systems. People like me. I told Celine that evening. "There's mold in the bathroom," I said. "Black mold. It needs to be fixed." "Oh, really?" She frowned. "I'll call someone this week." A week passed. No one came. "Did you call about the mold?" I asked. "It's on the list, Thea. I'm swamped with wedding planning. I'll get to it." Another week. The mold spread further now, covering nearly 3 feet of ceiling. My cough, the one I'd had since summer, got worse. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, hacking my chest tight, my throat raw. But Celine was busy, and I had nowhere else to go. That afternoon, Sebastian stopped by. I hadn't seen him in weeks. I'd stopped responding to his texts, stopped answering his calls, too tired and too ashamed to explain why. But he showed up anyway, knocking on the carriage house door with a bag of sandwiches and a look of worry I couldn't quite meet. "You look sick," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm fine." "When's the last time you saw a doctor?" "I have an appointment next week." "Thea." He stepped inside, glancing around, and I saw his expression change. "Can I use your bathroom?" I nodded, too tired to argue. He was gone less than a minute. When he came back, his face was pale. "You can't live with this," he said. "That's black mold, Thea. It's dangerous, especially for someone with your medical history." "I know. Celine's going to fix it." "When?" "She said she'll call someone." "When did you ask her?" 2 weeks ago." He stared at me. "You need to leave. Today. I'll help you find a place, pay the deposit, whatever you need." "I can't." "Why not?" "I need the income from the sculptures. If I leave, she'll stop selling them and I'll have nothing." "What income?" His voice rose, frustrated. "You're making $300 apiece while she's posting sold-out announcements and driving a Range Rover. You're not making income, Thea. You're being exploited." The word hung in the air between us. Exploited. "You don't understand," I said quietly. "Then help me understand." But I couldn't. Because if I said it out loud, if I admitted what I was starting to see, I'd have to face the fact that my sister wasn't helping me, that she was poisoning me, that I was trapped in something I didn't know how to escape. Sebastian left his card on the table again. "Call me," he said. "Please." After he left, I sat in the silent carriage house and stared at the ceiling, at the black mold creeping across it like a stain. I didn't see it yet, the pattern. The insurance card that went missing, the car that wouldn't start, the mold that spread while Celine promised to fix it. I didn't see that these weren't accidents, that someone who loved me wouldn't let me live in a room that was slowly poisoning me, that my sister wasn't forgetting my appointments, she was making sure I missed them. I didn't see it yet, but my body did. The day I found the laptop, everything changed. Celine texted me that afternoon while I was cleaning the guest bathrooms. "Can you grab my tax docs from the office filing cabinet top drawer? Need them by tonight." I hadn't been in her home office since the day I'd signed the partnership agreement. Was that really only 4 months ago? It felt like years. The door was open when I got there, which was unusual. Celine was protective of her space, like things organized her way. The office looked the same, white built-ins, wedding binders stacked on the credenza fabric swatches pinned to a corkboard, and on the desk her laptop screen bright. I went to the filing cabinet by the window. Top drawer, tax documents neatly labeled in folders. And that's when I saw it. The laptop was angled toward the desk chair, and from where I stood, I could see the screen. Email client open. An unread message at the top of the inbox, subject line in bold. Vesper sculpture, $28,000 sale confirmed. I froze. $28,000. For a moment, I thought I'd misread it. But no, there it was, black text on white background. A gallery owner in Charleston confirming payment, asking about shipping arrangements for the piece. My hands started shaking before my brain caught up to what I was seeing. I looked at the office door. Still open. Downstairs, I could hear Celine on the phone, her voice bright and distant. I had maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. I sat down in her chair. The sent folder had 47 emails with the word Vesper in them. I scrolled through with my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. June, July, August, September, October. 8 months of sales confirmations, invoices, negotiations. Sold Vesper, abstract figure, 10 inches, $15,000. Recommission inquiry client approved $19,000. Confirmed Vesper piece to Mount Pleasant buyer, $22,500. The numbers kept coming. 12,000, 28,000, 16, 31, 18, 14, 21. I stopped scrolling and opened a spreadsheet I found in a folder labeled Vesper Sales Tracking. Celine had been meticulous. Every piece I'd made, every sale, every deposit. The column on the right showed totals by month. June $45,000, July $57,500, August $59,000, September $53,000, October $60,000. I did the math 3 times because I couldn't believe it. Over 8 months, Celine had sold my work for at least $274,500. Maybe more. There were references to cash sales, private transactions she hadn't logged in the spreadsheet. I'd made 32 pieces, 32 sculptures. I'd poured everything into working 16-hour days, collapsing into bed, too exhausted to eat. At $300 a piece, I'd received $9,600. Celine had kept over $250,000. I kept scrolling numb now and found more. A contacts list labeled Vespers. Buyers. 50 names, email addresses, notes interested in larger pieces, budget $20,000 plus. Another folder, Vesper. Marketing materials. Screenshots of Instagram posts. Analytics showing that her posts about my work got triple the engagement of anything else she posted. I'd been keeping my own records, too, a small notebook hidden under the carriage house floorboards, where I tracked every symptom, every missed appointment, every sculpture I handed over. Dates, descriptions, the prices Celine claimed. I'd started it after the first missed oncology appointment in March, when I realized I couldn't trust her word. But I'd never had proof until now, never had the numbers to match my suspicions. Her follower count had grown from 340,000 to 480,000 since June. Because of me. Because of my art. Because she'd built her brand on my back while I scrubbed her toilets and lived in a room slowly poisoning me with mold. I sat there staring at the screen and understood finally what I'd been too tired and too scared to see. This wasn't a partnership. It wasn't even exploitation. It was theft. Footsteps on the stairs. Thea. Celine's voice getting closer. Did you find them? I closed the laptop so fast I nearly knocked over her coffee mug, grabbed the tax folder from the filing cabinet, my hands still shaking, tried to control my breathing. By the time she appeared in the doorway, I was standing by the window folder in hand face, as neutral as I could manage. Got them, I said, and my voice came out steady. I didn't know I was capable of that, of sounding normal when everything inside me was screaming. Perfect, thanks. She took the folder, glanced at the laptop. I've been so swamped with this wedding. I swear if one more vendor tries to upcharge me. She laughed, and I made myself smile. I'm sure it'll be beautiful. God, I hope so. She tucked the folder under her arm. Oh, can you make sure the guest room's ready? Colton's parents are visiting this weekend. Of course. After she left, I stood in the office for another minute, staring at the closed laptop. Then I went back to the carriage house, closed the door, and sat on the bed in the dark. Hours passed. Afternoon turned to evening, evening to night. I didn't turn on the lights, just sat there and watched the room fill with shadows, replaying the numbers in my head. $274,500. Every sculpture I'd signed Vesper. Every piece where I'd carved my hope into bronze, where I'd tried to prove I was still an artist, still worth something. She'd taken them and turned them into $250,000, and she'd given me $9,600. Not even 4%. I thought about the Instagram posts. Sold out in minutes. Limited availability. I thought about her voice on the phone at dinner parties. My sister's an incredible sculptor. I'm so proud to represent her work. I thought about the chore lists, the missed medical appointments, the mold spreading across my ceiling while she planned a wedding that probably cost more than she'd paid me in 8 months. I thought about the partnership agreement I'd signed, the one-page contract with its vague language and no transparency requirements. I thought about how she'd looked at me in that office just now, smiling, asking me to clean the guest room. Like I was nothing. Like I was help. I had 2 choices. I could run, pack my things tonight, take the $1,100 in my account, and disappear. Find a shelter, maybe. call Sebastian, beg for help, leave Charleston and never come back. Or I could stay long enough to gather evidence, to document what she'd done, to figure out who those 50 buyers were, what the real market value of my work was, how much she'd actually stolen. Stay long enough to take back what was mine. Running meant safety, maybe. But it also meant letting her keep everything, the money, the reputation she'd built on my art, the narrative that she'd discovered me, helped me, saved me. Staying meant risk. It meant living in this carriage house with its black mold and its ghost of who I used to be. It meant pretending I didn't know, smiling when she asked me to clean, accepting $300 while she pocketed $20,000. But staying also meant I had a chance to prove what she'd done, a chance to make her answer for it. I sat in the dark and made my choice. I would stay, not forever, just long enough to take back what was mine. I chose to stay. That night, I activated the voice recorder on my phone, buried it in a drawer beneath folded clothes, and let it run while I worked. I didn't know what I'd capture, but I knew I needed everything: voices, dates, admissions. 3 days later, Celine left for Charleston Art Week. She kissed Colton at the door, reminded me to water the ferns, and drove off in her Range Rover with a suitcase full of silk blouses and a smile I'd once believed. The moment her taillights disappeared down the Oak Line Drive, I moved. I sat down in her chair. The laptop sat closed on the white lacquer desk. I opened it. The screen woke, asking for a password, but I knew it. She'd made me type documents for her wedding weeks ago and had never changed it. 4 digits, 0615, June 15th. The date she'd planned to unveil me as her discovery. I typed it in. The desktop appeared. My hands shook as I navigated back to the email folder I'd seen days before. This time I didn't just read. I took screenshots, 47 of them. Sales confirmations, PayPal receipts, wire transfer notifications. One jumped out, $28,000 from G. Sterling Designs, LLC, dated October 18th. The sculpture I'd been paid $400 for. I opened a hidden folder on my iPhone SE labeled Medical Records 2024 and saved every image there. My phone buzzed a low battery warning. I ignored it. Next, I searched her Google Drive. Most folders were predictable: wedding plans, brand partnerships, tax 2024. But one buried 3 layers deep was labeled RX Estate. I opened it. Inside were PDFs, property appraisals for Marlowe House, a memo from a Charleston estate planning attorney, and a document titled Transfer of Ownership, Contingency Scenarios. I scrolled through legalese until I found a highlighted section. In the event of the co-owner's death or incapacitation, full title transfers to Celine A. Marlowe, sole surviving heir, per South Carolina Intestacy Law Revision, Article 62-2-103. My name appeared twice, once as co-owner terminally ill, and once in a footnote, medical power of attorney executed June 2024. I stared at the date. June. The same month I'd signed the partnership contract. The same month I'd been too grateful, too tired to read the fine print. I took 5 screenshots and moved on. In another subfolder, I found text message exports between Celine and Colton. I clicked one thread dated September 14th. Colton, how much longer do we keep this up? Celine, until the numbers make sense. She's producing faster than I expected. Colton, and if she asks questions? Celine, she won't. She's too sick. And if she gets worse, we're covered. Colton, the house. Celine, mine. Already filed the contingency paperwork. I screenshot the entire thread. My chest felt tight, my vision narrowing at the edges. I forced myself to breathe. I opened the browser history. 6 weeks ago, mid-September, Celine had Googled, "How long does black mold affect immunocompromised patients? Mold exposure, cancer relapse risk, and South Carolina tenant mold liability." She knew. She'd known for weeks. I went back to the carriage house and photographed the bathroom ceiling. The black blooms had spread across 2 feet of plaster, now tendrils reaching toward the shower. The air smelled sour. I uploaded the photo to my hidden folder, then added a note with the date. That night, I sat at the small table in the studio, my phone opened to Gmail, and I began to type. I'd spent the previous evening researching Dr. Camille Beaumont. At 61, she was one of the most respected art collectors in the Southeast. Her gallery in Savannah featured emerging sculptors, and she'd written essays on contemporary bronze work for art in America. But what mattered most was a detail I'd found in a 2019 interview. Her younger sister had died of ovarian cancer at 42. Dr. Beaumont had donated millions to research since. I wrote, "Dear Dr. Beaumont, my name is Theodora Marlowe. I am the sculptor behind the work you may know as Vesper. I am writing because I need help. For the past 8 months, I have been creating bronze sculptures while undergoing treatment for stage 3 ovarian cancer. My sister Celine Marlowe has been selling my work under a partnership agreement. I believed I was receiving fair compensation. I was not. I have discovered sales records exceeding $160,000. I have been paid $9,600. I am attaching documentation. I am also attaching evidence that my living conditions have been deliberately neglected in ways that threaten my health. I don't know who else to ask. I read about your sister. I thought you might understand. If you can help, or if you know someone who can please reply. Theodora Marlowe Vesper." I attach 6 screenshots, the $28,000 transfer, the RX estate documents, the text thread, the Google searches the mold photo, and one image of a bronze sculpture I'd signed Vesper in tiny letters along the base. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. My thumb hovered over send. Every rational part of me said this was reckless. She could ignore me, forward it to Celine, think I was lying. But I'd spent 8 months being silent. I pressed send. The email disappeared into the void. I set my phone down and sat in the dark, listening to the cicadas and the distant hum of the highway. I didn't know if she'd reply. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. But for the first time in 8 months, I wasn't waiting to be saved. I was saving myself. Dr. Beaumont replied 36 hours later. I was scrubbing the kitchen floor when my phone buzzed. I pulled off one rubber glove and opened Gmail, my hands still damp. The subject line read, I need your help." Her message was short. "Theodora, I have been following Vesper's work for nearly a year. I own 2 of your pieces, a small bronze I purchased in July and another in September. I didn't know the artist behind them was in danger. I believe you. How can I help? Camille Beaumont." I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the wet floor and cried. Over the next 4 days, we exchanged 12 emails. I sent her the full story. The diagnosis, the bankruptcy, the partnership contract, the stolen sales, the estate documents, the mold, the missed medical appointments. She asked careful questions, dates, amounts, names. She didn't doubt me once. On the 4th day, she wrote, "I would like to sponsor a solo exhibition of your work, a proper one. I have a relationship with the Charleston Museum of Art. We can use their hall for an opening reception, June 15th, 2025. 7 months. Can you create enough new pieces by then?" I stared at the screen. An exhibition, public, official, my work under my name. I typed back, "Yes, but I want to use it for more than just art. I want to expose what Celine has done. I want the buyers to know they were lied to. I want her to face consequences." Her reply came within an hour. "Then we'll make sure they do." That afternoon, I met Sebastian at a cafe on King Street. It was the first time I'd left the estate in weeks. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window watching tourists pass with shopping bags and cameras. When Sebastian arrived, he took one look at me and frowned. "You've lost weight," he said. "I know." "Theodora, what's going on?" I told him. All of it. The $161,500 in stolen sales, the fake expenses, the power of attorney documents, the mold, the deliberate sabotage of my medical care, the plan with Dr. Beaumont. Sebastian didn't interrupt. When I finished, he set down his coffee and said very quietly, "I'm going to testify." "You don't have to." "I do, because I have records." He pulled out his phone and opened a folder. "Every time Celine posted one of your pieces on Instagram, I screenshot it. I matched the post to the dates you gave me the sculptures. I kept track of what you said they sold for versus what she claimed. I didn't know why I was doing it. I just had a bad feeling." He turned the screen toward me. There were dozens of images, Instagram posts with captions like "sold," $18,000 and commission piece, serious inquiries only alongside my sculptures. Next to each was a note in Sebastian's handwriting. Theodora paid $300. You kept all of this? I'm an architect and a salvage dealer. I document everything. He met my eyes, and I knew something was wrong. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. Don't thank me, just survive until June. The next morning, Dr. Beaumont wired me $2,000. The email called it an advance for materials and living expenses. I walked 3 miles to a coastal Federal Credit Union branch I'd found on Google Maps, opened an account with my driver's license and the wire transfer receipt, and deposited the money. The account wasn't linked to my old address. Celine would never know. For the first time in nearly a year, I had money that was mine. I returned to the carriage house and went back to work. Every morning I woke at 6, cleaned the mansion, prepared meals, smiled when Celine complimented my sculptures. Every evening I worked in the studio, producing 2 pieces a week as she demanded. I said yes and thank you and, of course. But now I was documenting everything. I kept my phone's voice recorder running during the day, hidden in my apron pocket. I took photos of every sculpture before I handed it over, angles, signatures, timestamps. I started a journal logging dates, payments, Celine's comments, Colton's remarks. I printed out bank statements showing the $300 deposits and filed them in a folder I hid beneath a loose floorboard in the studio. I became 2 people. One scrubbed floors and kept her head down. The other built a case. Celine never noticed. She was too busy planning her June wedding filming content, fielding sponsorship offers. She'd gained 10,000 new Instagram followers since September, most of them drawn by my sculptures. In December, she asked me to create a sculpture for her wedding gift table, something romantic and exclusive she could raffle off to guests. Of course, I said. I'd be honored. She beamed. You're such a sweetheart, Theodora. I'm so glad you're here. I smiled and nodded and went back to the studio. That night, I made 2 audio notes, one documenting her request, one documenting my compliance. 7 months until June 15th, 7 months until the Charleston Museum of Art. 7 months until every collector, influencer, and journalist in the city would see my work under my name and learn what Celine had done. I didn't know if I'd survive that long. My body was failing in small, quiet ways, the cough that wouldn't stop the dizziness that hit when I stood too fast, the weight that kept falling off. But I had Dr. Beaumont, I had Sebastian, I had evidence, and I had a plan. For 7 months, I would play the victim, but I was building a case. In December, Celine made her move. She called me into the living room on a Wednesday afternoon. Colton sat beside her on the cream sofa, his arm draped across the back cushions. She held her phone in one hand, screen tilted toward me. I have incredible news, she said, smiling. The Charleston Museum of Art is hosting their annual Spring Gala in June. It's the biggest fundraiser of the year, collectors, curators, patrons from all over the Southeast, and they've invited me to curate an emerging artist spotlight. I stood in the doorway, dish towel still in my hands. That's wonderful. It gets better. She leaned forward. I'm going to unveil Vesper, a full reveal identity story, everything. I'll present you as my protege, the artist I discovered and nurtured. We'll position it as a Cinderella story, you surviving cancer, creating beauty despite everything, and me, the sister who gave you a platform. Colton nodded. It's a smart play. Celine's been building buzz for months. This locks in her credibility as a tastemaker. I felt my pulse slow, my thoughts sharpening into focus. She wasn't doing this for me. She was doing this for herself, cementing her position in Charleston's art world, transforming stolen work into social capital. She thought she was staging my debut. She had no idea I was already planning the finale. That's generous, I said carefully. When in June, the 15th. It's a Saturday. Black tie, full press coverage. I've already reserved a display alcove for your pieces. She scrolled through her phone. I'm thinking we showcase 8 to 10 sculptures. I'll handle all the logistics, signage, artist bio, lighting. You just need to keep producing. Of course. And Theodora. She looked up, her expression softening. This is going to change everything for you, for both of us. I smiled. I know. That night, I called Dr. Beaumont. She's planning to reveal you at the museum gala, I said, pacing the studio floor. June 15th, the same date we set for the exhibition. There was a pause. Then Dr. Beaumont laughed a low, dry sound. "She's gift wrapping this for us." "What do you mean?" "We don't need to create a separate event. We hijack hers. She's already secured the venue, the press, the audience. All we have to do is make sure the truth comes out before she can control the narrative." Her voice sharpened. "Can you create something undeniable, a centerpiece sculpture that forces the conversation?" I looked at the clay on my workbench, half-formed shapes, fragments of ideas I'd been sketching for weeks. "Yes, then make it count." I started the next morning. The sculpture would be called The Weight of Silence, life-size. A woman bronze kneeling with her head bowed and her arms extended. Chains wrapped around her wrists, but the links were breaking, some already shattered on the ground, others mid-fracture. Her face would be turned upward, eyes open, mouth parted as if drawing breath for the first time in years. It would be me, but it would also be every woman who'd been silenced, exploited, erased. I worked in secret late at night when Celine thought I was asleep. I started with a wire armature, building the skeleton of the figure inch by inch. Then I layered clay-shaping muscle and bone, the curve of a spine under strained hands that had scrubbed floors and molded beauty in the same breath. Sebastian helped me transport the mold to the foundry on James Island. It took 2 trips in his truck. The bronze pour was scheduled for late January. By February, I'd have the finished piece. "This is the one," Sebastian said, studying the clay model. "This is the one they'll remember." It has to be. Celine noticed something had changed. It was a Saturday in mid-December. I was washing dishes after breakfast when she appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "You seem different lately," she said. I kept my hands in the soapy water, scrubbing a plate. "Different? How? I don't know. Lighter, less—" She trailed off, searching for the word. "Less defeated." My chest tightened. I forced my face into something soft, something tired. "I'm just trying to stay hopeful. You said the gala would change things. I guess I'm starting to believe it." She watched me for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Good, you should. You've worked so hard, Theodora. You deserve this." "Thank you." She left. I dried my hands and returned to the studio, heart still racing. That night, I added a new entry to my journal. December 14th, 2024. Celine suspicious. Told her I'm hopeful about the gala. She believed it. Note, she sees what she wants to see. Use that. I also recorded a voice memo speaking quietly into my phone. Celine announced today that she's curating an artist spotlight at the Charleston Museum Gala on June 15th. She plans to reveal my identity as Vesper and position herself as my mentor. She has no idea Dr. Beaumont and I have been coordinating for weeks. She has no idea the centerpiece sculpture will tell the truth. I saved the file, backed it up to the cloud, and hid my phone under the floorboards. By the end of December, Celine had posted 3 Instagram teasers, a blurred photo of one of my sculptures with the caption, "Big Things Coming in 2025, a selfie in front of the Charleston Museum with "Honored to be part of something special," and a close-up of a bronze hand with "Stay tuned for the reveal." Her follower count climbed to 375,000. Meanwhile, I cast the arms for the weight of silence. The bronze cooled in the foundry, dark and heavy, the chain links sharp enough to cut. I ran my fingers over the fractured metal and thought about June. Celine thought she was orchestrating my debut. She thought she'd stand beside me on that stage, bathed in applause, credited as the visionary who'd discovered Vesper. She didn't know I'd invited Dr. Beaumont to attend. She didn't know Sebastian had a folder of evidence. She didn't know I'd been documenting every theft, every lie, every act of sabotage for 4 months. She didn't know the sculpture she'd see that night would depict a woman breaking free. And she didn't know that when the lights came up and the crowd turned to look, I would be the one holding the microphone. She thought she was staging my debut. She didn't know I was writing the ending. The months passed slowly. January, I kept sculpting. 2 pieces a week, sometimes 3 when Celine had a buyer lined up. I worked through winter cold in the unheated studio, my breath fogging the air, my hands stiff around the clay. By the end of the month, Celine had sold 8 more sculptures. I knew because I checked her laptop every time she left the house. A $14,000 sale to a collector in Asheville. Another for $19,500 to an interior designer in Atlanta. A third, $17,000 to a private buyer, whose name I recognized from Charleston's social registry. I was paid $300 per piece, $2,400 total. The running count in my hidden journal now read, total stolen $142,000. I photographed every payment notification, every sculpture before I handed it over every email confirmation I could find in Celine's inbox. I backed everything up to a cloud drive Sebastian had helped me set up, one Celine didn't know existed. On January 23rd, she told me I was really hitting my stride. I smiled and said, thank you. February. The pain came back on a Tuesday morning. Sharp low in my abdomen, the kind that made me double over while scrubbing the guest bathroom. I sat on the tile floor, arms wrapped around my knees, and waited for it to pass. It didn't. That afternoon, while Celine was at a brand partnership meeting downtown, I called an Uber. I gave the driver the address for MUSC and sat in the back seat with my phone clutched in both hands, praying Celine wouldn't check the security camera footage. At the hospital registration desk, I explained I'd lost my insurance card. They looked up my policy using my social security number and date of birth information Celine couldn't control. It took 20 minutes, but they found it. Dr. Harrison saw me within an hour. She ran blood work, ordered an ultrasound, asked careful questions about my living conditions. Your counts are stable, she said, finally reviewing the results on her tablet. No signs of recurrence, but Theodora, your cortisol levels are through the roof. And you've lost another 8 pounds since your last visit. I've been working a lot. She set down the tablet. Are you safe where you're living? I looked at my hands. I will be soon. She didn't push, but she wrote a note in my file about environmental stressors and handed me a referral for a social worker. I folded it into my pocket and took another Uber home. Celine never asked where I'd been. March. Sebastian brought the lawyer on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Her name was Claire Ashford, 47, sharp-eyed, with 20 years' experience in employment and financial fraud. She worked pro bono for a nonprofit that helped women escape exploitative situations. We met in Sebastian's salvage shop office, a cramped room that smelled like wood polish and old paper. I spread my evidence across his desk, printed emails, bank statements, Instagram screenshots, the partnership contract, photos of the mold voice recordings of Celine's comments. Dr. Beaumont's correspondence. Claire read through everything in silence. When she finished, she looked up and said, "This is textbook fraud and unjust enrichment. We can also argue reckless endangerment based on the housing conditions and missed medical appointments. Can we win?" "Yes, especially if you're willing to go public." She tapped the photos of the weight of silence, the bronze woman breaking chains. "And if you have witnesses?" "I do." She drafted a cease and desist letter, a demand for restitution, and an outline for a police report. We scheduled a meeting with a Charleston PD detective for early May. "You've been very thorough," Claire said as she packed up her files. "Most people in your position don't have this much documentation." "I couldn't afford not to," I said. April. Celine's Instagram hit 400,000 followers on April 9th. She posted a celebratory selfie with the caption, "Grateful for this community. Big things ahead." 3 days later, she posted a video. It was 45 seconds long, shot in the Carriage House studio without my knowledge. The camera panned across my workbench, clay-covered tools, half-finished molds, a bronze arm resting on a towel. Then it cut to me, hunched over a sculpture, my hands shaping wet clay. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun. I looked thin, tired, focused. The caption read, "Behind the scenes with my incredibly talented protege. Watching her create is pure magic. Stay tuned for the big reveal in June." The video got 63,000 views in 2 days. I watched it 3 times sitting alone in the studio at midnight. Then I screen recorded it, saved it to the cloud, and added a note to my journal. April 12th, 2025. Celine filmed me without consent, posted to 400,000 followers, positioning herself as mentor, evidence of exploitation of image and labor. I didn't say a word to her. May. The bronze casting of The Weight of Silence was completed on May 3rd. Sebastian and I transported it to a storage unit Dr. Beaumont had rented near the museum. The sculpture weighed 230 pounds. It took 4 people to lift it onto the pedal. I stood in the dim storage unit staring at the finished piece. The woman's face, my face, looked upward, mouth open, eyes wide. The chains around her wrists were fractured, some links scattered on the base, others still clinging to her skin. Her body was tense, caught in the moment between captivity and freedom. "It's the best thing you've ever made," Sebastian said quietly. "It has to be," Dr. Beaumont called that evening. "I've arranged a private viewing for 30 collectors on the evening of June 15th, she said. "Same night as Celine's gala. The museum has agreed to open the North Gallery for us. Press will be there. Charleston City Paper Art in America, a few regional outlets. We'll unveil The Weight of Silence at 8 p.m. Celine's event starts at 7:30. She'll be in the building." "I know, that's the point." On May 27th, Claire and I met with Detective Lucia Ramos at Charleston Police Headquarters. I brought 3 binders of evidence. Detective Ramos took notes, asked questions, requested copies of the financial records, and recorded conversations. "This is solid," she said. "I'll need to coordinate with the DA's office, but based on what you've shown me, we can move forward with charges for fraud, theft by conversion, and potentially criminal neglect. The timeline works in your favor. Everything escalates toward the gala. If you're planning a public confrontation, I'd advise having legal representation present." "I will." She handed me her card. "Call me the morning of June 15th. I'll have officers on standby." I left the station and sat in Sebastian's truck for 10 minutes staring at the card in my hand. It was real now, not just a plan, not just evidence, a case, a reckoning. June 15th. I woke before dawn. The sky outside the carriage house window was soft gray, the air still cool. I stood in the center of the studio and looked around at the empty workbenches, the shelves of tools, the faint dust of dried clay on the floor. This was the last morning I would wake up here. I showered dressed in the only nice outfit I owned, a simple navy sheath dress I'd bought 6 years ago for an architecture firm holiday party. It still fit, though it hung a little looser now. I brushed my hair, pinned it back, put on the small silver earrings my mother had left me. In the kitchen, I made coffee and sat at the table watching the sun rise over the magnolia trees. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Beaumont. "Everything is ready. See you tonight." Another from Sebastian. "You've got this." Another from Claire Ashford. "Detective Ramos is on standby. I'll meet you at the museum at 6 p.m. I finished my coffee, washed the cup, and set it in the dish rack. Then I walked back to the studio, picked up my phone, and opened the voice recorder app one last time. June 15th, 2025, 7 a.m. Today is the Charleston Museum Gala. Celine thinks she's unveiling Vesper as her protege. She doesn't know Doctor. Beaumont has organized a private viewing in the same building. She doesn't know the police have been briefed. She doesn't know the collectors, the press, and the buyers she lied to will all be in the same room. I paused looking out the window at the main house, the columned porch, the wrought iron balconies, the place that had been both shelter and prison. Today the world will know my name. I stopped the recording, saved it, and put the phone in my purse. Then I walked out the door. Before I reveal what happened at the prom, the night everything will be exposed, please leave comment 15 so I know you're still following along. The next part is crucial. And please note the story contains some fictional elements and may not be entirely true. If you don't want to hear more, you can stop here. The Charleston Museum of Art glittered with 200 guests. I arrived at 6, stepping through the arched entrance into a hall lit by crystal chandeliers. Men in tuxedos, women in silk gowns, waitstaff circulating with champagne flutes. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the east wall. Photographers clustered by the red carpet flashes popping every few seconds. I wore my navy dress and my mother's silver earrings. I carried nothing but a small clutch with my phone, my ID, and Detective Ramos's card. Celine spotted me immediately. She crossed the room in a rose gold gown, her smile wide and practiced. "Theodora, you made it." She kissed my cheek, then turned to the couple beside her. "This is my sister, the sculptor I've been mentoring. Isn't she wonderful?" The couple nodded politely. Celine gestured toward the back of the hall. "I've saved you a seat at table 12. It's near the display. You'll have a perfect view." Table 12 was 3 rows from the back. Not the VIP section near the stage where Colton sat with Charleston's art patrons and a state senator. Not even the middle tables where local collectors and gallery owners mingled. The back. I smiled. "Thank you." I walked to my seat, slowly scanning the room. Doctor. Beaumont stood near the north gallery entrance, elegant in charcoal silk, speaking quietly with a white-haired man I recognized from Art in America profiles. Sebastian leaned against a column on the far side, arms crossed, watching. Claire Ashford sat 2 tables over a slim briefcase at her feet. Everything was in place. At 7:15, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Celine stepped into the circle of light, microphone in hand, and the room applauded. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice warm and steady. "Thank you so much for being here tonight. This event means the world to me, not just as a celebration of art, but as a celebration of family resilience and the power of creative mentorship." She paused, letting the moment settle. Behind her, projected on a screen, was a montage of Instagram photos, my sculptures, close-ups of bronze hands, and abstract forms, Celine standing beside them in carefully curated poses. 2 years ago, she continued, my sister Theodora was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. She lost everything, her career, her home, her savings. When she came to live with me in Charleston, she was broken, but I saw something in her, a spark, a gift she'd buried under years of architecture blueprints and corporate work. The audience murmured sympathetically. Someone near the front dabbed at their eyes. I gave her space to create. I gave her materials, encouragement, a platform, and together we built something extraordinary. The artist you know as Vesper the sculptor, whose work has captivated collectors across the Southeast, is my sister, and tonight I'm honored to share her journey with all of you. Applause. Phones out, recording. Instagram stories going live. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap. Celine gestured toward the display area to her left, where 12 of my sculptures stood on white pedestals under gallery lights. Small bronze plaques beneath each one read courtesy of the Celine Marlowe collection. I've curated a selection of Vesper's finest pieces for tonight's exhibition, Celine said. Each one represents a moment of transformation, hers and mine. Because mentorship isn't just about giving, it's about believing in someone when they can't believe in themselves. More applause, a standing ovation from the front tables. I didn't stand. At 7:25, an auctioneer in a slim black suit took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special opportunity tonight. Miss Marlowe has generously offered one original Vesper sculpture for live auction, with proceeds supporting the museum's Emerging Artist Fund. A waiter wheeled out a pedestal. On it sat a small bronze piece I'd made in March, an abstract curve 8 inches tall, the surface textured to catch the light. We'll start the bidding at $5,000. A paddle went up, then another. The auctioneer's voice rose in pitch, calling numbers, pointing. 6,000, 8, 10, 12. The room buzzed. Collectors leaned forward. Phones tracked the bids. 15,000, 16, 18. Sold $18,000 to Paddle 73. Applause erupted. I looked toward the winning bidder, a man in his 50s, silver-haired, wearing a Rolex. He shook Colton's hand. I recognized him from a dinner months ago, one of Colton's real estate partners. The bid was staged. The money would never reach me. I felt nothing, just clarity. Celine returned to the microphone, her face glowing. Thank you all so much. And now I'd like to invite my sister to the stage. Theodora, will you come up here? The spotlight swung toward table 12. Every head in the room turned. Cameras pivoted. I stood. The room was silent except for the rustle of fabric, the clink of a glass being set down. I walked to the stage slowly, deliberately. Celine extended her hand, pulling me into the light. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders, squeezing gently, and turned us both toward the audience. Theodora has been so humble about her work, Celine said into the mic. But tonight I want her to share her journey with all of you. The struggle, the hope, the gratitude. She held out the microphone. Tell them, Theodora. Tell them what this has meant to you. She expected tears. She expected a trembling voice, a story about sisterly love and second chances. She expected me to thank her in front of 200 witnesses to validate the narrative she'd spent 8 months constructing. The microphone was warm in my hand. I could feel its weight, the faint hum of the sound system vibrating through the metal. I looked out at the audience. Faces I didn't know watching me with polite curiosity. A few phones still recording. Celine beside me, smiling, her hand resting lightly on my back. I took a breath. "Thank you, Celine," I said, my voice clear and even, "for giving me this opportunity." Her smile widened. "Because tonight," I continued, "I'm going to tell them the truth." The room went still. Celine's hand tightened on my shoulder. Her smile faltered just barely. "Theodora." I stepped away from her, turning to face the audience fully. "My name is Theodora Marlowe," I said into the microphone. "I am the sculptor known as Vesper, and everything you just heard was a lie." The silence shattered. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung toward me. Celine's face drained of color. I took the microphone, but I didn't say what she expected. I looked at my sister, then I looked at the crowd. 200 faces stared back at me. The murmurs had stopped. Phones were still raised, recording. Celine stood frozen beside me, her hand hovering near my arm, her smile gone. I took a breath and stepped forward away from her toward the edge of the stage. "My name is Theodora Marlowe," I said into the microphone, my voice steady. "I am the sculptor you know as Vesper. Every piece in this room, every bronze curve, every textured surface, every signature hidden along the base I made with my own hands." I gestured toward the display behind me where 12 of my sculptures stood on white pedestals under gallery lights. My sister didn't discover me. She didn't mentor me. She stole from me. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few sharp intakes of breath. Someone near the front said, "Oh my God." Celine lunged for the microphone. "Theodora, stop." I stepped back, turning my body so she couldn't reach me. A security guard moved closer to the stage, watching. "I have proof," I said. I pulled a small remote from my clutch and clicked it. The projection screen behind me, the one that had shown Celine's curated Instagram photos, flickered. Then it filled with an image, a screenshot of an email. "Subject Vesper bronze sculpture. Sale confirmed from g.sterling.designs@gmail.com to celinemarlowe.collab@gmail.com. Date October 18th, 2024. Hi Celine, wire transfer completed. $28,000 as agreed. Can't wait to feature this piece in the Kiowa project. Thanks again." I let the audience read it. Then I clicked to the next image, a bank statement showing the deposit. $28,000 into an account under Celine's name. Then another email, another transfer. 15,000, 19,000, 12,000. I clicked through 8 screenshots, each one showing a sale, a buyer, a dollar amount. The audience watched in silence. "Over 8 months." I said, "My sister sold my work for $274,500. I paused, letting the number settle. Through tonight, before this speech, she'd already pocketed $161,500. The rest is still in her accounts, waiting to be processed. She paid me $9,600 total. The silence broke. Voices rose, shock, outrage, confusion. Cameras pivoted between me and Celine. A woman in the third row stood up, her face pale. Celine grabbed my wrist. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I gave you everything." I pulled free and turned back to the crowd. "Let me show you what she gave me." I clicked the remote again. The screen filled with a photo, the carriage house bathroom ceiling, black mold spreading across 2 feet of plaster in jagged organic blooms. Another photo, my insurance card, half hidden beneath papers on Celine's desk. Then a screenshot of text messages. "Colton, how much longer do we keep this up, Celine? Until the numbers make sense. And if she gets worse, we're covered. Colton." The house. Celine mine. Already filed the contingency paperwork. The room went deadly quiet. "I have stage 3 ovarian cancer." I said, my voice calm and clear. "I've been in remission for a year, but my sister knew that black mold can trigger relapse in immunocompromised patients. She Googled it 6 weeks before this gala." I clicked to another screenshot, Celine's browser history. "How long does black mold affect immunocompromised patients? Mold exposure, cancer relapse risk. South Carolina tenant mold liability." Someone in the audience gasped. A man near the back swore under his breath. "She kept me in a moldy house," I said. "She sabotaged my medical appointments. She let me believe I was being cared for while she waited for me to die so she could take everything." Celine's face crumpled. "That's not Theodora, you're twisting—" Colton moved toward the side exit. A security guard stepped in front of him, arms crossed. I'm not twisting anything, I said. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces, horrified, sympathetic, riveted. I documented everything. I have 7 months of evidence, and I have witnesses. From the back of the room, a woman in charcoal silk stood. Dr. Camille Beaumont walked toward the stage, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The crowd parted for her. She climbed the steps and stood beside me, taking the second microphone from its stand. My name is Dr. Camille Beaumont, she said. I'm a private collector and the owner of 2 Vesper Sculptures pieces I purchased from Celine Marlowe in July and September of last year. I had no idea the artist was being exploited. She turned to the audience. When Theodora contacted me in November, I believed her immediately. I've spent the past 7 months working with her to build a legal case and to arrange tonight's exhibition. She paused. I am offering Theodora exclusive representation through my gallery, including a guaranteed exhibition contract and advance funding for her next 50 pieces. Based on current market value, the publicity from tonight's events, and comparable cases of emerging sculptors gaining national attention, we conservatively estimate the total value of her existing work and 3-year pipeline at $2.6 million. That's assuming fair market pricing, something she was never given. And I will personally advocate for every collector in this room to pay fair price for her work moving forward, including a guaranteed exhibition contract and advance funding for her next 50 pieces. Based on current market value and the publicity from tonight's events, we estimate her complete collection at $2.6 million, and I will personally advocate for every collector here to pay fair price moving forward. The room exploded. Applause, gasps, a few people standing. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Celine staggered back, her face white. No, this is insane. You can't. The side doors opened. 4 Charleston police officers entered, led by a woman in a dark suit, Detective Lucia Ramos. I'd called her that morning just as she'd instructed. If the evidence is presented publicly and she doesn't dispute the facts, Ramos had said, the warrant becomes executable immediately. We'll be in the building. She'd kept her word. She walked calmly to the stage badge clipped to her belt. Celine Marlowe, she said. Celine turned. Yes, but you're under arrest for felony fraud, theft by conversion, and financial exploitation. Detective Ramos pulled a pair of handcuffs from her belt. You have the right to remain silent. The room erupted again. Murmurs, shouts, phones raised higher. Celine's face twisted. This is a mistake. This is Theodora. Tell them. An officer stepped forward and cuffed her wrists in front of 200 witnesses. Flashbulbs popped. Instagram stories went live. A journalist from Charleston City paper pushed to the front notepad out. Colton was detained next, his hands cuffed behind his back. He didn't speak. He just stared at the floor as they led him toward the exit. Celine twisted in the officer's grip, screaming at me over her shoulder. You ruined my life. Everything I built you, destroyed it. I stood on the stage, microphone loose in my hand, and I wanted to scream back. I wanted to tell her she'd tried to let me die. I wanted to list every sculpture, every lie, every day I'd scrubbed her floors while she sold my soul for Instagram clout. But I didn't say anything. I just watched as they let her out. The crowd watched, too silent now, the room heavy with shock and something like justice. When the doors closed behind her, Dr. Beaumont touched my shoulder. It's over, she said quietly. I nodded. But I didn't feel relief yet. Not quite. Just a strange, weightless clarity, the kind that comes when you've been holding your breath for so long you forget what air tastes like. I looked out at the crowd one last time, at the sculptures that had been stolen from me and reclaimed, at the faces that had believed a lie and now knew the truth. The truth had spoken. And finally, so had I. The trial lasted 6 weeks. It began in early August in a third-floor courtroom at Charleston County Courthouse. The air conditioning hummed constantly. The jury 12 faces I studied every morning sat in 2 rows along the left wall, watching everything. Celine wore navy blazers and pearl earrings. Colton sat beside her in charcoal suits, his jaw tight. They didn't look at me. The charges were read on day 1. Celine Ann Marlowe and Colton James Westbrook, the clerk said, were charged with 4 counts felony fraud in the amount of $161,500. financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, reckless endangerment through toxic mold exposure, and identity theft via forged partnership agreement. Celine's lawyer, a silver-haired man named Richard Hale, stood and pleaded not guilty on all counts. The prosecution began the next day. They presented 47 emails printed and bound in 3-ring binders. The assistant district attorney, a woman in her 40s, named Maria Santos, walked the jury through each one. Sales confirmations from collectors in Asheville, Atlanta, Savannah. Wire transfers into Celine's personal account. PayPal receipts showing deposits that never reached me. They showed bank statements, $161,500 in sales, $9,600 paid to me. They presented a mold inspection report from the carriage house. The lab results showed toxic black mold Stachybotrys chartarum at levels dangerous to anyone lethal to someone immunocompromised. Ms. Marlowe knew her sister had stage 3 ovarian cancer. Santos said, standing in front of the jury. She knew Theodora's immune system was fragile, and she Googled the risks of mold exposure 6 weeks before the gala. She clicked a remote. Celine's search history filled the projector screen. How long does black mold affect immunocompromised patients? A juror in the back row shook his head. Dr. Rebecca Harrison testified on day 9. She wore a gray suit and spoke in calm, measured tones. Theodora Marlowe had 3 follow-up appointments scheduled between February and June of 2025, Dr. Harrison said. She missed 2 of them. When I finally saw her in May, she'd lost 19 pounds. Her cortisol was dangerously elevated. She showed signs of chronic stress and environmental toxin exposure. In your medical opinion, Santos asked, was Ms. Marlowe's health at risk during this time? Yes, significantly. Could the missed appointments and mold exposure have triggered a cancer relapse? Absolutely. Sebastian Vale testified on day 12. He brought a folder of printed Instagram posts Celine's account showing my sculptures with captions like sold, $22,000, and commission inquiries, DM for pricing. I kept records. Sebastian said, his voice steady. Every time Celine posted a sale, I matched it to the date Theodora gave me the piece and the amount Celine claimed she paid. The discrepancies were massive. A sculpture Celine said sold for $300 was listed publicly at $18,000. Richard Hale, Celine's lawyer, cross-examined every witness. He called the emails a family arrangement that was misunderstood. He argued that I'd signed a partnership agreement willingly. He tried to paint me as bitter, ungrateful, vindictive. Isn't it true, he asked Dr. Harrison, that Miss Marlowe could have sought medical care on her own? She had no transportation and no money, Dr. Harrison replied evenly. Her sister controlled both. On day 23, I took the witness stand. I sat in the wooden chair for 4 hours. My lawyer, Claire Ashford, asked me to walk through the timeline. I described arriving in Charleston in January 2024. The chores, the partnership contract, the night I found Celine's laptop, the 7 months I spent documenting everything. Then Claire handed me a printed text thread. Can you read this aloud for the jury? She asked. I looked down at the page. My hands didn't shake. This is a text conversation between Celine Marlowe and Colton Westbrook dated March 10, 2025. I said, Colton asks, how much longer do we keep this up? Celine replies, a few more months. If she stays stable, we ride it out. If she gets worse. Colton, the house. Celine. Already filed the contingency. The house is ours. I looked up. 3 jurors were staring at Celine. One woman in the front row had her hand over her mouth. They were waiting, I said quietly, for me to die. Richard Hale objected. The judge sustained it. But it didn't matter. The jury had heard. On September 18th, after 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 11 hours. When they returned, the foreperson, a middle-aged black woman in a blue cardigan, stood and read the verdict. On the count of felony fraud, we find the defendant Celine Marlowe guilty. Celine's face went white. On the count of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, we find the defendant guilty. Her lawyer touched her arm. She pulled away. On the count of reckless endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. The foreperson turned to Colton, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted whispers, a few gasps, reporters scribbling notes. The judge banged her gavel twice. Sentencing came 3 days later. Celine Marlowe. Judge Patricia Langford said, her voice firm, "You are hereby sentenced to 8 years in the South Carolina Department of Corrections. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $340,000, the full cost of your sister's medical treatment, plus court fees. You are permanently prohibited from profiting from any depiction of this case or your sister's story." She turned to Colton. "Colton Westbrook, you are sentenced to 5 years in the South Carolina Department of Corrections and fined $100,000. The same profit prohibition applies." Celine started to cry. Colton stared straight ahead. I sat in the gallery between Sebastian and Dr. Beaumont. Claire sat behind me, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. I waited for relief, for triumph, for some kind of catharsis. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a vast silence echoing the kind that comes after a storm. The wind dies, the rain stops, and you stand in the wreckage surrounded by what's left, and you realize the quiet is louder than the chaos ever was. When the judge dismissed the court, I walked out of the building into the September heat. News cameras clustered on the courthouse steps. A reporter called my name. I didn't stop. Sebastian drove me home, not to the carriage house, but to the small studio apartment I'd rented in August with the advance from Dr. Beaumont. It had one room, a kitchen the size of a closet, and windows that looked out over a quiet street lined with live oaks. I sat on the floor and stared at the wall for an hour. Justice had been served. Celine and Colton would spend years in prison. I had money, freedom, a future, but I didn't feel whole yet. I felt like someone who'd been holding her breath underwater for so long that even on the surface she couldn't remember how to breathe. 6 months after the gala, I stood in my own gallery. Vesper Studio occupied a renovated warehouse space on Queen Street in the heart of Charleston's Arts District. The ceilings were 14 feet high, crossed with exposed steel beams. The walls were white brick. 3 industrial windows ran the length of the east wall, flooding the room with winter light. My name was on the door. Not hidden in a signature along the base of a sculpture, not buried in an Instagram caption. My name in brushed brass letters, Theodora Marlowe, Vesper Studio. The exhibition opened on a Friday evening in early December. I called it The Weight of Silence and Other Works. 27 sculptures spanning 2 years, from the small polymer clay figures I'd made in the carriage house to the life-size bronze centerpiece that had stood on the museum stage in June. The weight of silence anchored the center of the gallery. The bronze woman kneeling, chains breaking face turned upward. Visitors circled her slowly, some reaching out to touch the fractured metal, then pulling back. A critic from Art in America called the collection haunting, powerful, unforgettable, a meditation on captivity and liberation, rendered in bronze and grief. Charleston City Paper ran a feature with the headline, "From Exploitation to Exhibition, Theodora Marlowe Reclaims Her Voice." By 8 o'clock, the gallery was full. Collectors in tailored coats, art students with notebooks, journalists with cameras. A few people I didn't know, a few I did. Sebastian stood near the back wall, arms crossed, grinning. He'd helped me install every piece, lifting, adjusting pedestals, running extension cords for the gallery lights. He refused payment. "You've already paid me," he'd said, "by still being here." Dr. Beaumont arrived in deep green velvet, her white hair pinned back. She'd written the exhibition forward, a 2-page essay that appeared in the printed catalog. The opening line read, "To witness Theodora Marlowe's work is to witness survival transformed into art." She found me near the entrance and squeezed my hand. "You did it," she said quietly. "We did it." She smiled. "No, you did." Claire Ashford came with her wife, a pediatrician named Rachel. They bought a small bronze abstract, one of the pieces I'd made in March, during the worst months. Claire told me she wanted it in her office. "So my clients know what's possible," she said. The night before the public opening, I'd hosted a private preview for 12 women. I'd met them through a survivors advocacy group. Claire had connected me with women who'd escaped financial abuse, labor, trafficking, coercive relationships. We walked through the gallery in silence. One woman stood in front of the weight of silence for 20 minutes crying. Afterward, I told them about the mentorship program I was starting in January. Free studio access for women rebuilding their lives, legal aid referrals, material stipends. A handful of them signed up on the spot. "You're giving us what no one gave you," one woman said. "I'm giving you what I wish I'd had sooner," I replied. At 10 o'clock, the crowd thinned. Sebastian left to close his shop. Dr. Beaumont kissed my cheek and promised to return tomorrow. The last guests trickled out, their voices fading into the December night. I locked the door and turned off half the gallery lights. The sculptures stood in pools of shadow and gold. I walked among them slowly, my footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. I stopped in front of the weight of silence. The woman's bronze face, my face, looked up at the ceiling. Mouth, parted eyes wide. The chains at her wrists were shattered, some links scattered across the base. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago. Sick, broke, desperate. Sitting in a Minneapolis hospital hearing the word cancer and feeling my entire life collapse. Moving to Charleston with one suitcase and a suitcase full of shame. Scrubbing floors, losing weight, sculpting in secret, believing I owed my survival to someone who was stealing it. I thought about the night I found the laptop. The months I spent documenting, gathering evidence, building a case while pretending to be compliant. The gala. The trial. The silence that came after the verdict, the strange, hollow quiet I hadn't known how to fill. And I thought about now, standing in a gallery with my name on the door. Healthy. 1 year cancer-free according to Dr. Harrison's latest scan. My hair had grown back soft and silver-streaked at the temples. I'd gained 15 pounds. I could walk 3 miles without getting winded. Dr. Harrison had told me at my last appointment, "Your will to survive may be what saved you, Theodora. The body follows the mind, and your mind never quit." I'd smiled, but I thought it wasn't just will. It was fury and hope and the refusal to let someone else write my ending. I reached out and touched the bronze woman's hand, the one breaking free from the last chain. For so long, I'd thought silence was weakness, that staying quiet made me complicit, that speaking up would shatter me into pieces I'd never put back together. But standing here now, surrounded by the sculptures only I could have made, I understood something I hadn't before. Silence was never weakness. It was the weight I carried until I was strong enough to set it down. And when I finally did, when I stood on that stage in June and said, "My name is Theodora Marlowe, I am Vesper," and everything you just heard was a lie, I wasn't breaking. I was becoming whole. I walked to the front window and looked out at Queen Street. The cobblestones glistened under the streetlights. A couple walked past, hands linked, laughing. A cat darted across the road. The air smelled like rain and winter jasmine. I thought about everything I'd lost. My health, my savings, my sense of safety. 2 years of my life spent under someone else's control. But I also thought about everything I'd gained. A voice, a gallery, a community of people who believed me, who stood beside me, who helped me build something I could never have built alone. I thought about the 12 women who'd come to the preview, the ones who would come to my studio in January looking for the same thing I'd been looking for 2 years ago, a way forward. I would give them what I hadn't had: space, time, belief, a door with their name on it, even if only metaphorically. Because I knew now what I hadn't known then. Survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. I turned back to the gallery, to the sculptures standing in the low light. My work, my voice, my truth rendered in bronze and clay, and years of silence finally broken. My name is Theodora Marlowe. I am Vesper, and this is only the beginning. And to you listening to this story, remember this: God gave me the strength to survive when I thought I had nothing left. When I sat in that hospital in Minneapolis hearing the word cancer, I prayed for a miracle. When I found the laptop and saw the theft, I prayed for courage. And when I stood on that stage in June holding the microphone, I felt God's hand steadying mine. He didn't give me an easy road, but He gave me a voice. Looking back now, I see the lessons clearly. Don't let gratitude blind you to exploitation. Family betrayal cuts the deepest because we never expect it. We're taught that blood means loyalty, that sisterhood is sacred. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who see your vulnerability as opportunity. I ignored the red flags because I was desperate, because I believed family revenge meant I'd failed at love. I was wrong. If you're in my situation, trapped, silenced, exploited, please don't wait as long as I did. Document everything. Find one person you trust. Reach out. God will send you allies just like he sent me Sebastian, Dr. Beaumont, and Claire. But you have to take the first step. And if someone you love is suffering under family betrayal, believe them. Don't ask why they stayed. Ask how you can help them leave. Silence isn't weakness, but it shouldn't be a prison. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below. Your words matter. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel for more true stories of survival, justice, and hope. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And a reminder, the stories ahead may contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, feel free to choose something else that suits you better. My name is Theodora Marlowe. I am Vesper, and I'm still here.